Hey, where's Rance? Hey,
Where's Rance?
hey.
God damn it, fuck. Okay, look, I hear you. I know people want rants videos, and they're coming. It's just that I tend to get obsessed with certain video topics, and they bug the shit out of me until they become reality. Once I exorcise the Monster Girl Quest demon that is currently infesting my brain, Rants 03 will be my next big project, I promise. That being said, while that's being worked on, I thought I'd tide you over a bit with something I've been wanting to check out for a while now, the acid trip known as Evenicle Rance. A pre-order bonus for the Japanese release of Alicesoft's JRPG Evenicle, which replaces the protagonist Aster with none other than Rance, everyone's favorite struggle-snuggly, weirdly well-written fantasy antihero. This game's actually pretty significant for me and my history as a YouTuber for a couple of reasons. The first is something many of you already know. I'm known for making detailed reviews of the Rance games. It's part of my brand at this point and is the reason my VTuber model has shark teeth. But what many of you may not know is that Evenicle was actually the first adult game I ever reviewed unless you count Katawa Shoujo, which I don't. And it started as an April Fool's joke. Yeah, the idea was, what if I do a normal-ass review of this outrageously sexual game? Wouldn't that be funny? It quickly stopped being a joke, and now I'm one of the relatively few who will look at explicit media and not just do the whole, oh my god, this porn has sex in it thing. Does this really matter to this video as a whole? No, not really. I just wanted to make it known why I give way more of a shit about Evenicle Rance than you'd expect. So with that, let's get into the game. The premise is very simple. It's literally just the first chapter of Evenicle with the protagonist swapped to Rance. Which is funny because while Rance and Aster share a bond in both being horny dumbasses, Aster is a fundamentally good and caring person, and Rance is a funny but narcissistic asshole. And of course, one of Rance's defining characteristics is that he really likes sex, but isn't particularly concerned with whether or not the people around him also want sex. Those of you who've played Evenicle know why this is significant. Evenicle and Rance share many world-building similarities in that they're both medieval fantasy worlds accented with magitech that pushes the technology ahead. So you have swords and sorcery, but also as much industrial capacity as the story demands. Also, there's a very unique collection of fantasy creatures that they both share. Put simply, at a glance, you could be forgiven for thinking these are set in the same world. However, Evenicle has one major distinction. Its goddess Mother Eve has put forth two divine commandments. Do not kill another human being, and do not have more than one sexual partner. Breaking either of these rules makes you an outlaw, signified by the black ring that magically appears on your finger. The short version is that this makes you incapable of gathering or producing anything of value, meaning that you generally need to rely on charity or theft to survive, and you're also generally not allowed in society. This is obviously a concern for Rance since he's famously bad at limiting his sexual partners. However, there are exceptions to both rules. Anyone given the title of soldier is able to kill, as they are the means of defending the populace against outlaw attacks. Knights are not only allowed to kill, but they can have multiple partners depending on their rank so that they can more effectively pass on their good genes. So both the original Evenicle and Evenicle Rance have the protagonist go on a heroic journey, with Aster's thing being that he just keeps having one fewer open slot than he needs, and Rance's being that he wants to dip his dick in every warm hole he comes across. Evenicle's lore is more complicated than that, but it's not super relevant here. Gameplay-wise, I don't have all that much to say. Not because Evenicle doesn't have great gameplay or complex mechanics that I could talk about. It absolutely does, and in fact, it still stands as my personal favorite JRPG. And it's not that Evenicle Rance doesn't play like Evenicle. On a technical level, it's basically a vertical slice of the full game. The reason I don't have a lot to say about the gameplay is because Evenicle Rance is poorly balanced on purpose. Evenicle Rance is not meant to be a full challenging video game experience. That's what Evenicle is. Evenicle Rance is a fan disc that's designed to be a short haha what if scenario. You're supposed to basically blitz through it for story content. So what Alicesoft did was make Rance overpowered, which to be fair is sort of canonically accurate. But Rance starts at level 30, which isn't maxed out but does allow him to one-hit nearly every enemy. So while all the systems from the full game are present, like unlockable skills, levels, XP, the really neat gear upgrade system that I've never seen another IP replicate, none of them actually matter and you're expected to just ignore them since you can just steamroll everything with your stats. That also ends up being good since the UI is almost entirely untranslated. It's a fan translation and I assume that would have been a lot of extra work. So yeah, let's just skip past the gameplay then. The writing. One of the things about Rance is that while it started out as pure parody, it eventually turned into a full-on comedy epic with surprisingly solid characters and a convoluted but compelling story that manages to balance a silly tone with fairly serious themes. That's the main series, at least. Evenicle Rance is really just a shitpost, and as far as the story goes in a broader sense, there's not really much there. In fact, I'd say it's basically the video game equivalent of flash fiction. But that makes sense. The point of Evenicle Rance is that it's essentially the Alicesoft writers having fun and saying, what if Rance? But that's not to say there's nothing there to talk about. Now, I do think that when you take Evenicle Rance for what it is, there's a lot to love about it. However, I do need to acknowledge its biggest weakness, which is not actually something that could realistically be worked around. Rance is the only character from his universe to make it into the game. Rance definitely steals the show in his games, but it's his relationships with the other characters and their unique personalities and story arcs that take Rance from the silly little romp of the original 1989 game and turn it into the kind of story that people are eager to spend hundreds of hours on, to the point where the series finale had the largest script of any video game back when it was released, which was cheered on by fans. That's just missing from Evenicle Rance, and even though it is a small-scale game that focuses on the comedy, the absence of Rance's supporting cast was very noticeable. That being said, I really appreciated what the writers did with Evenicle Rance. They took the core concept and just ran with it. In particular, I really like how they took the characters I know and love from Evenicle and actually played around with them. So one of the first things Rance does in the game is struggle snuggle the Princess Risha. Naturally, she's not exactly thrilled by this development and ends up hating him. But then with the Knight Ramius, he gets with her in basically the same way Aster does in Evenicle, where she's been injected with a powerful aphrodisiac and he volunteers as tribute. So she's extremely grateful to him because she's convinced that she's undesirable. Yeah, because nobody wants a big titty tomboy waifu, right? Oh, Rance is a knight by this point, so he's just using his second wife slot. But this lets the writers explore a different dynamic between Risha and Ramius. In the full game, both have their own hang-ups, and a big part of their early story is how they both have an unhealthy relationship with the ideals surrounding love, sex, and duty. They both appreciate and respect Aster for their own reasons, but they hold themselves back, and there's this focus on them actually falling in love with Aster and developing an understanding that they are capable and deserving of unconditional love. In Evenicle Rance, Risha now has this internal conflict where she fucking hates Rance for good reason, but she has to hide the fact from Ramius both to protect her feelings, but also to keep her from feeling like she's duty-bound to kill her new husband. She rationalizes it as not wanting Ramius to become an outlaw, but she's a knight, so she wouldn't. I actually think that was a bit of a writing fuck-up, but whatever. But this new dynamic lets us see Ramius and Risha interact in ways they just didn't in the full game, and that's something I, as an appreciator of fiction, love to see. To me, that's actually the biggest reason I like what-if stories. Yeah, the plot implications are interesting, but I really enjoy seeing how writers explore how their characters will react to situations their primary stories just don't allow them to experience. Granted, this wasn't explored in any kind of depth in Evenicle Rance, but the idea was there, and that kept me invested beyond just the comedic elements. But I really shouldn't gloss over the comedy, since that's the primary purpose behind Evenicle Rance. Evenicle is already a pretty silly game, even though it does have serious storytelling going on. But at its core, the story works around the protagonist Aster, who does go on the path of knighthood for selfish reasons, those being to get enough wife slots to marry his two foster sisters even as he keeps filling them up with the women he meets along the way. But he's a fundamentally noble and altruistic person who likes that his goal allows him to do good, and he develops deep loving relationships with all of his wives. Throwing Rance into the mix gives us a natural avenue for humor due to the inherent conflict he sows. For example, in the aforementioned thing with Risha pretending to love Rance for Ramius' sake, Rance is too much of a dumbass to realize that she's just playing a role and he annoys the shit out of her with his antics as a result. He's just so narcissistic that he's just like, yeah, being my woman would make any girl happy. In fact, he actually says almost exactly that line at one point. I'm not gonna go joke by joke because that would kind of destroy the point of playing the game for yourself. But that's what the majority of the game focuses on, taking these moments, characters, and scenes that you'll remember from the full game and seeing just how Rance fucks with it. Also, they completely upend the normal story path because Rance just doesn't follow the rules like Aster does. Spoiler alert for the next few seconds. If I remember, I'll leave a timestamp on screen to skip to if you want to avoid it, but Evenicle Rance is less than 2 hours long and the plot really isn't the focus. But while Aster ends up continuing on the path of a knight to continue sleeping around without incurring divine wrath, Rance just fucking struggle snuggles Toa within 5 minutes of meeting her, becoming an outlaw. Naturally, he can't exactly continue on as a knight like that, so he ends up joining Snakecrest, the villain organization, and taking over the world that way, and that's how it ends. Interestingly, this also shows that if you become an outlaw, any wives or husbands you have also become outlaws because Ramius and Reach become outlaws when Rance does. I don't think that was something that was ever confirmed in the original game, so that's interesting world building stuff right there. But honestly, at that point in the story, the biggest thing that was messing with me was how Rance was actually able to control himself for so long because him not being an outlaw just isn't in his character. What can I really say? It's just fucking funny. The last thing I want to bring up before closing things out is that this game very much has fun with the references and nods to both the full game and the Rance series. Yarase in particular definitely teases his character arc from the full game, which I won't spoil here. But also, without even paying that close attention, I noticed multiple references to stories and jokes from the Rance games. Like when they run into a herd of cows and Rance feels an unexplainable desire to punch one of them, a reference to the side quest from Evenicle Rance where his slave Syl turns into a cow. One of the best side stories in that game, by the way. Or another reference to Evenicle Rance where he tries to fuck a ghost, only to go right through her and crash into a wall. I am fully aware that this is pure cheap fan service designed to make people like me soy out at all the funnies. And you know what? I'm doing exactly that, and I don't give a fuck. This was a great experience all around, despite the untranslated UI and how the text formatting was absolutely fucked at times. No, I don't care that the game is entirely made up of recycled assets and doesn't have any real place in the story. This was a fun time as a fan of both Evenicle and Rance, and I enjoyed watching Rance be an agent of chaos while QD occasionally showed up to obliterate both the third and fourth wall, while hilariously advertising other Alicesoft games. This was a total shitpost of a game that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but honestly it shouldn't be slept on. And there was still enough for me to talk about it for 10 minutes, which is impressive for what it is. If you have a free afternoon, consider playing it yourself. Thanks for watching. Big thank you to my members, especially my $10 supporters President Irina Vladimirovna Putina and Robert Legg. Members of all tiers got this video early, so if that's something that interests you, consider hitting the join button down below. As I said earlier in the video, I'm currently working on what will eventually be 2 Monster Girl Quest videos before finally getting back to the mainline Rance series. So do be on the lookout for that, but I want to do more smaller scale videos like this, just so I can still put something out on the main channel as I work on the videos that take dozens of hours. I have some ideas for things I may want to cover, but if you have anything that can be experienced in under 10 hours that you want a video on, feel free to let me know. Aside from that, don't forget to like the video because it really does help me out, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Play the Electro Swing. Oh shit, wait, editing ads here. I forgot to mention this, but you know it's a true Rance game because despite the limited screen time, Rance does in fact drop a gamer word. Alright, fever dream over. Time to get back to work on Monster Girl Quest. Oh fuck me, editing ads from further in the future. I completely forgot to thank Michael SK for voicing the intro to this video. He's a visual novel YouTuber and he's really close to 10k. It'd be cool if we could push him over the edge. Link in the description. Okay, I'm done for real now. Bye.
Hit the road, Jack. I thought you'd come back no more, no more.